And with that, I'm Thomas Hall, Executive Director of CleanStart. Welcome to our CleanStart Perspectives today with Mudit Saxena, CEO and co-founder of XeroHome. I first met Mudit years ago at one of our grant education classes where he had an idea. And then we reconnected recently when I was talking with grid and electrification experts from the other side of the country who were like, hey, did you know about XeroHome in your backyard? And I'm like, but I think it's great because we're finally having a perspective again with an entrepreneur here that's making a real difference and partnering with local organizations to make something happen and be part of the bigger energy transition. So I'd like to welcome Mudit Saxena, and I'm going to let him take over.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, everybody. Real honor and pleasure to be here. And thanks for the opportunity. So my name is Mudit Saxena, and as Thomas mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of XeroHome. My background is in architecture and building science, and I've worked as an energy consultant here in Sacramento for over 2 decades now. And so I've got a lot of experience working with utilities, kind of understand the landscape of how energy efficiency as a business works. And about 4 years ago, I decided to take a lot of that, the knowledge that I had about these different areas and really build XeroHome. And today I'd like to give a presentation about how XeroHome came about and what it's all about. So let's just jump right into it. Let me share my screen. Go to presentation mode right here. Thomas, can you see my screen? Okay, perfect, thank you. So the presentation I'm going to talk about today is achieving scale in home decarbonization. So just big picture first. We're all aware that climate change is happening around us, and the only way to get ourselves any kind of control over that is to reduce the amount of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And to do that, we really have to look at all the sources of carbon emission. And very roughly speaking, about 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions are attributable to buildings, and in one form or the other. And so buildings are a very important part of that solution for climate change and reducing carbon emissions. And this is a number that people have known for a while. So architects, engineers, and building scientists have been working at it. And we now have a way to make new buildings that are zero net energy and zero carbon. And importantly, we can almost do that at the same cost of doing sort of a building as usual. And so the problem isn't new buildings. New buildings, I think we've kind of got a handle on that. The problem is existing buildings. We have hundreds of thousands of existing buildings, millions of homes in the country that are old, inefficient, and they consume energy in a very inefficient way. And that's the reason why the number is so big when it comes to buildings contributing to climate change. So we really have to get a handle on existing buildings. So now let me jump into my slides here. When we talk about existing buildings, really this is the slide I've loved to start with. And this particular graphic has confused even the experts when I've shown it to them. This is the total square footage of all buildings in the US on a pie chart. If you flatten out every building in the United States and put it on a pie chart, this is what it'll look like. The blue segment, which is 79% of all square footage, is residential. Out of that, the big chunk coming out at us is single-family detached residential buildings. These are single-family homes, the kinds that you and I would live in. They make up almost 70% of all square footage in America, right? 70% of every building we've ever built is residential, single-family residential buildings. Commercial is the green segment, and in institutional and industrial is this orange one. Really astounding number when you think about it. And when you, like I said, it takes a little while to get our heads wrapped around it, that this is how much single family residential exists in the country. But you might look at it and say, well, if the problem is carbon emissions and energy usage, then it's really the energy that counts, not the square footage. The commercial and industrial buildings may be using more energy per square foot. And I'd say you're right. So now let's look at the second graphic. The graphic on the right is a study that was done to look at the savings potential from retrofitting or upgrading those buildings to make them more energy efficient. Retrofitting is a term used in the industry, is essentially say, here, you're taking a building and you're upgrading it to make it more energy efficient. And clearly, commercial buildings have a lot more scope now compared to their square footage on the left. So they're a bigger piece of the pie. But single family residential, still about 50% of all energy savings are going to come from single family residential buildings, the homes that we live in. That's huge. So if that is the problem, right? So what do we do about it? What am I really trying to say to you? Well, what does that mean, that we should quit our day jobs and just go retrofit all buildings, all of us? Is that what we really need to be doing? Well, yeah, we might actually have to do that, because the square footage and the scale of the problem is so big that the way that we've been thinking of solving these problems in the past is just not going to work anymore. We have to think of new ways of doing this. So if we did quit our day jobs and we did got into trucks and started retrofitting old homes, as I'm suggesting here, tongue in cheek, what we will find is that there is this particular segment, which is single family residential buildings, is extremely diverse and is very fragmented. So every house is different. Every house is built differently. It's designed differently. It's in a different climate. It's got a different way of the people who live it and use it differently. And so what that means is that I could do an energy audit for my home and figure out a list of things that I should be doing for my house that are energy cost efficient. But you would have to do the same energy audit on your home to build your own list. It's not easy to scale a program in the residential sector. That's the problem. So the only tool we really have in the industry right now to solve this and to address this is the energy audit. And it's called getting a whole house energy analysis done or energy audit done. And I did that for my home. It cost me $500, and my house isn't even that big. It can go up to $2,000 for you to get that answer. And it takes about 2 days for somebody to complete the audit and 12 days for them to really give us a report. Not a scalable solution, as you can see. Who's going to be spending $500 to just get the answer? Remember, this is just the answer. You spend $500 just to know what you should be doing. That's the problem. And when you open up this report, it is full of 25 pages of highly technical data. And if you're talking to residential customers, like homeowners, this is not going to stick. This is not presented in a way that the homeowner can understand. And even for energy experts like myself, it was a very hard report to read. Really not, it's very accurate, but not what a homeowner wants. So what we are really doing with energy audits one at a time is kind of similar to how a doctor would try to cure one patient at a time. And they'd be able to do that very well for one patient, and then the next one and the next one. And you'd need a lot of doctors to be able to, if there's a lot of patients, as we have in our case, it's not a very scalable solution when you look at the problem at hand. The key to crack this, in my opinion, is using data and scale. And I'm going to borrow a term here from medicine, which is called epidemiology, which is the study of patterns in populations. And if we're really smart about the way we can use data, I think we can solve this problem. The good news is that when it comes to residential buildings, there's a lot of great data out there. There is property tax assessment data, which tells you square footage, the age of the home, which year it was built. There is building permit data that tells us if any new, if an HVAC system was replaced or a roof was replaced or something was added to the home. And all that is in public domain. So we don't even need to request permissions from homeowners to acquire that. We can acquire that at scale. And of course, there's three-dimensional geometry data available at scale now. If you take out your smartphone and open your Maps app and put two fingers and swipe up, you'll actually see a 3D geometry of your neighborhood, right? So the 3D geometry exists as well. And so we can bring all of this great data together. And the idea that I had was, why don't we get all of this information? It's all in public domain anyway. Let's bring all of this together. And can we actually build an energy model for every home in a city? Now, an energy model is essentially a mathematical representation of a house. It is the assets of that house, the insulation, windows, kind of air conditioning system you have, all taken as inputs into a large mathematical model, including 3D geometry, as I'm showing here. And you can feed it with, you can then put energy usage data in it. And then you can say, hey, this home is located in Sacramento, and bring the climate or weather file for Sacramento to that model. And what comes out of that energy model is recommendations. The energy model can then tell you, well, here's how much energy this home will consume if you change its windows, if you change the air conditioning, if you change the water heating system, or if you tighten the ducts. So all those things can come out of that energy model. So if we can build energy models at scale for entire cities, then we can provide recommendations to homeowners without having to wait for them to spend $500 to do an energy audit, right? So we were able to take that idea and build the first sort of model of that, or first MVP, or minimum viable product from it, about 3 years ago. In 2020, we had our first deployment. And it's not a very, there's a lot of technical problems in trying to develop this, but we were able to cross all those technical hurdles. And now we can do this at scale. So in 2020, we had our first project with Southern California Edison, and we deployed XeroHome for the city of Santa Monica. What you're seeing on the screen is all 8,247 homes in Santa Monica. We brought all this rich data for all these homes, and we built an automated process around it to build energy models for each and every one of them. So every dot represents an energy model that we developed. By the way, an energy model is exactly what the energy auditor was doing when they came to my house. They collected this data, went back to their office, and developed an energy model, right? So we've effectively figured out how to digitize that entire manual process and scale it. And with that comes a lot of great opportunities. So once you have this thing at scale, you can then zoom in to one home, and you can start to pull out some recommendations for that home from that energy model and say, well, here's the things that we think you should be doing to get to net zero energy. That's the graphic that you're seeing on the top of the screen. And you can start to engage with the homeowner and say, just type in your home address. We've got an energy model for you already in the back end. We'll start showing you what works for your home. You don't have to spend a dollar to do it, right? So you can start to bring homeowners on board without having to ask them to do energy audits. And then you can kind of scale that back to the full city, and really give some very useful information to the utility running energy efficiency programs, and also to the city. So those two are the ones who become our paying clients. The city that has a climate action plan in place can now start to bring some of this information and start to say, hey, what does this all mean? How are we going to reach our climate goals? With the XeroHome models, we can kind of simulate different ways of doing it and really figure out the right policies and programs to put in place. So that's the power of building these models at scale. So from a homeowner's perspective, the thing looks really simple, and we designed this so that the homeowner has a really flawless sort of streamlined experience. And we've developed both a mobile version and sort of a laptop version of XeroHome and its web portal. And it's really simple. It's simple, online, and it's free, right? So this is what the homeowner wants to see. You just type in their home address. As a homeowner, you would do that. And once you do that, it quickly pulls up the energy model for your home on the back end on our server, and it starts to display some really important information to you. It'll tell you things about rebates that are in your region. It'll tell you that, oh, hey, we've done some calculations already. Looks like you could be saving, thousands of dollars on your utility bill, and you could be reducing carbon to a certain extent. And then we give them options to either replace something that's in your home or reduce your energy usage or explore the rebates that your utility or your city might be offering for you to do these things. And so we bring them in and we start showing them these things. And it's very meaningful because we have an energy model for their home. So for example, if I'm a homeowner and I have a water heater that needs replacing, like my water heater is broken or it's getting old, I'm in the market for a new water heater, I can click on replace and I can tell the app that, look, I need a water heater. And it can run a simulation on that energy model and show me the difference between a heat pump water heater, a gas tankless water heater, and a gas tank water heater. And what does this all mean in terms of my utility bills? So you can click on each of these options on our tool, and within the program, it's swapping out these options in the energy model for your home and showing you your estimated utility bill before and after. So this is the information that the homeowner needs to make that decision. And we also give you a recommendation. And especially if there's a rebate that the utility is offering, in our case in Sacramento, SMUD's offering great rebates on heat pumps, for example, then the heat pump would rise on that recommendation scale because you want to make use of that rebate while it's there. And so we surface those rebates. We make it easy for the homeowner to actually find those rebates, apply for them, and also kind of take a decision based on information and education rather than hearsay or someone's recommendation here or there. So this becomes a much better way for the homeowner to really strategize about how they could be making their home more carbon free or energy efficient, reducing utility bills, and so on. So that is the background with XeroHome. That's the homeowner side of things. But on the other side, which is the utilities and cities, we've created what we call our utility portal. So I showed you the slide before, which had Santa Monica and all the dots, the 8,000 homes. We can do that for an entire city, and we're working with SMUD to be able to do this for the city of Sacramento now. And you can create a heat map for the city that shows where are the potentials for more energy savings versus less energy savings. And so you can really get some targeting insights at that city or regional scale. And we could do this, we can scale that up to a region as well. So PG&E or Edison or any other utility that we work with, we can kind of scale that up. And it's all fed by these energy models running in the background, right? So you have energy models that are helping homeowners make decisions, and those same energy models are also at this larger level helping utilities make their decisions as well. So this is where the cities get really excited when they see this, because from their perspective, they have climate action plans and they need to develop policies and programs to support those climate goals. And seeing clarity on how they can actually achieve those climate goals is very valuable to them. So this is kind of our business model. We never charge a homeowner for showing them information about what they should be doing. Their experience is always free. The utility and the city are our paying clients who get information that they can use to run their programs more effectively. We developed the first version of XeroHome in 2018. We got a grant from DOE Small Business Innovation Research Grant. And that allowed us to collaborate with a national lab called the National Renewable Energy Lab. And we were able to put together the first minimum viable product of this idea called XeroHome at that point. And then in 2019, we got our first projects with Edison and with SMUD. And that was when we were really lucky to get clients like SMUD and Edison, because they really said, okay, this is a very promising idea. Here, take a pilot and explore what we can do with it. We'll work with you. And so we did that in 2019. In 2020, we deployed XeroHome for the first time. So homeowners had access to XeroHome in Santa Monica. So 8,000 homes. In fact, it's still live. You can go in and if you type in a home address in Santa Monica, you can actually see what that homeowner would get for their home. In 2021, which is last year, we did more work with PG&E and with the SVCE. We did eight new cities in California and developed some reach code recommendations for those cities. And then this year, we are working with the city of Sacramento, and the city is really working with us on developing a framework and a roadmap for existing building electrification. And so we're helping them identify the opportunities to make homes, to electrify homes, and develop a strategy around that for the city. So that's a really great project, and we're looking forward to it. We're also working with the city of San Luis Obispo and with the Southern Company in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're in talks with three more here. So with all this attention and traction that we're getting from utilities and our product, we're really growing very quickly here with a humble beginning in Santa Monica. At that point, 8,000 homes seemed like a lot to us, but now it's tiny. So in 2020, we had 8,000 homes in Santa Monica. In 2021, we added San Luis Obispo and 8 other cities. And in 2022, with two large cities, Atlanta and Sacramento, being added, by the end of 2022, our portal will be accessible to almost 300,000 homeowners. So that's great, because all of these 300,000 homes and their homeowners will be able to use the XeroHome tool, type in their home address, and start getting some great recommendations about how to make their homes more energy efficient. So I'm going to end here. It's a reminder that the climate clock is ticking fast, and we need to make a dent, and we really have to think of the problem in new ways, because the old ways of thinking is just not going to get us there fast enough. And so let's get started. So that's it from me. Thomas, back to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Everyone, round of applause for Mudit there. It was great. I love to see the growth that you've had since that first grant. Now, one of the questions that I kind of see in the chat, and one that I have, is there's always the phrase, bad quality data in, bad quality out. How do you deal with the quality of data and assuming that everyone filled out the correct city forms? How do you handle that?
Wonderful question. Yeah, great question. Garbage in, garbage out, right? So there are two ways that we deal with this. First of all, we have multiple points of collecting that data. So there are property assessment and building permit data that we get from our data vendors. We also work with the utilities and with the cities themselves to acquire that data. So we kind of triangulate some of that. So if there's error in data collection, we take that out. Number two is a more important question, which is, what if the data itself has not been captured correctly? What if the building permits didn't capture the square footage right, or the building the building property assessment data didn't? So the way we've developed a method, or sort of a process around that, is when you go into XeroHome, we very quickly get you to a point where we're showing you some useful information, and we start to engage with you, and that's with the publicly available data. And we acknowledge right up front that data may have some errors in it. And we have a system of badges. We have a white badge, green badge, and blue badge. We first give you the white badge and say, all these recommendations are based on publicly available data, which can or cannot be correct or may have errors in them. the homeowner, once he or she is engaged, we start to then say, hey, would you like to spend some more time on the platform and start answering a few questions for us? And we have a questionnaire which we've now boiled it down to about 16 questions that we think are the most important questions to get right, to get the recommendations out correctly. And given how much time that the homeowner has, how much interest they have, they can start answering those questions. And if they answer all 16 questions, then they would have confirmed for us some of the basic facts that we collected about the home. So the homeowner's input is very valuable in validating some of the data that we received from these public domain data sets. So with the homeowner giving us input, that we turn that white badge into a green badge. And we say, hey, great, man, you gave us all this information. Now our energy model, and this happens in real time on our platform, as you give more information, the energy model is updated and new recommendations are thrown at you. So it's actually, it's almost game-like the homeowner comes in and says, you assumed that I had 6 inches of insulation. I just checked, it's actually 18 inches of insulation. And they type in the number 18 and hit go. And on the platform, it changes the insulation level and throws back a new set of recommendations to you. So you get sort of immediate gratification as well. So then what we saw with Santa Monica is homeowners that started the questionnaire went pretty deep in the questionnaire before they quit. We give them an option to quit anytime. We don't have to answer all 16 questions, but the ones that started actually went pretty far. And that's very encouraging because when the homeowner gets in, they start enjoying the process, and they also start owning the recommendations that come out. And it's a good feedback loop. So that's how we've sort of built a process around making sure that the data that we are using is as accurate as possible. Eventually, at the end, if you really are interested in getting the most accurate recommendations, in our opinion, those 16 questions get us pretty close. But if you can also give us energy usage data, and then we'll give you the blue badge. And then we can calibrate our model against your energy data. And that gives us perhaps the most powerful model, right? If the homeowner is engaged with us to the point where he gets his energy data, then we have a very, very powerful, very accurate representation of their home. So we have a process around making sure that the data that we end up with is accurate. But at any point, the homeowner has the option and say, I don't want to spend any more time on this. I'm done. They can exit out of it. So that's the answer.
That be kind of similar for states or counties where building permits don't have that information to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay. So I imagine that your approach to because we have kind of a comment from Louis Philippi Bellier about areas that don't. Do you think your approach will change much based on the region, or that you'll be able to apply the same tools to get the information?
Yeah, so the tool is designed so that minimally it needs property tax assessment to build the energy model and 3D geometry. And those two pieces of information are available for every city in the country. And so we have that. We have everything we need to build that first level model, the white badge model. And then after that, we take the approach of, hey, if we can get better data from the city, from data vendors on building permits, and if we can get better data from the homeowner themselves, that in a piecemeal fashion gets added into the model, making it more and more and more accurate. So we start with what's available, and we enrich it with more data as and when it becomes available. And so that's the process we built. Now it's important to remember that the overall recommendations when they come out of the energy model, they don't change a lot in everything we've seen. When you develop recommendations and say, hey, I think you should be upgrading your ceiling insulation, or I think you should be upgrading your water heater or sealing your ducts or so on. there's a level of tolerance that from the energy model that can be accommodated. And so even with some inaccuracies in the input data, the recommendations can still be quite sound. And we've done some checks with energy audits. There were 8 homes that did energy audits with us, and we checked the energy audit recommendations against XeroHome's recommendations, and we found a very good match between the two. And this was 8 homes that we did in Santa Monica as part of the ET work we did with Southern California Edison. They had the same question, which is, hey, how accurate is it, and how does it compare to sort of business as usual method of doing things, which is energy audits, which, let me remind you, cost $500 and not scalable. So, right. So there's, while we lose a little bit on accuracy, we gain in scale.
So the kind of model is cities and utilities pay you to basically provide this for their region so that they can better target or reach their emissions reduction goals and target their spending with rebates. Right. So you're saying you're not going to charge the homeowner. It's going to be based on cities. So like a homeowner goes in there, they go through it, and I think the example you had, it was like they could thousands of dollars in savings, but they're still probably going to have to spend thousands of dollars to be able, before they get the rebate potentially, and even above and beyond the rebate. Have you talked or looked at providing financing options for people?
Yeah, great question. I think that is very critical for a homeowner to make a decision, because these things can run upwards of $8,000, $10,000, sometimes even more if you want to do a full retrofitting of your home. So it's very important that homeowners have access to great tools such as financing and rebates, and that really falls in both the city and the utilities laps, essentially, to be able to provide those. We've looked into ways that we can connect them to existing financing at this point. We don't offer financing ourselves. That's not a model we've chosen. But there's PACE financing available. There is other financing vehicles available from cities and utilities. A lot of them are starting to offer zero interest loans. And what I wanted to also emphasize that there's a lot happening in this space, and very likely a lot's going to happen in the next 10 years. Because as we come closer to 2030, 2040, those carbon emission goals become more and more real for these utilities. And so it's very likely that the rebates are going to get better. Financing options are going to get better. Our job essentially is to bring those together and to feed them in a way to the homeowner so that they can take an action based on all that available data.
So do you know how many homeowners have taken advantage of your app so far or used it to do improvements?
Yeah, so in the first year of our deployment in Santa Monica, which is about 8,000 homes, we had about 1,200 visitors, and 800 of them created accounts with us. So those were homeowners that were in Santa Monica. So I'm sorry, I misspoke. 100 account creations and 800 unique visitors from Santa Monica. So about 10% of the homeowners in Santa Monica used our tool. This is a pretty good number. If you compare that to existing methods that the utility has used to engage with homeowners, the number is less than 1%. It's like 0.4%. So 10% is a big jump from there. So we had about 10% of Santa Monica residents use our tool. So that's about 800 of them. And about 100 of them, 1/8 of those, were then created an account with us. They engaged with the questionnaire. They answered those 16 questions. They told us that they did something. So we queried them. We actually asked them questions. We sent them surveys. 14% of them told us that the XeroHome tool inspired them to do something about their home, actually do an energy audit, or actually do an energy upgrade. and they love the recommendation that came out of it. So that's a rough number. So 14% of about the 10% that did come to the platform. Yeah, those numbers are actually really high compared to they look low if I just talk about it like this, but when you think about how many homeowners we have been able to engage with our programs in the past, that number is anemic. It is less than 0.5%. So getting up to 10% and getting 14% of those homeowners to do something is quite, the utilities were quite happy with that.
That's just some good numbers there. So now I see there's some questions about, how do you get things added to the app, adding partners. So at the end of this, drop your, contact information into the chat. And, but there's another startup in the area, EV Life, which is kind of doing the same thing, but with electric vehicles, where they're like, okay, how do you go and apply all the discounts for your area to your electric vehicle and take advantage of them? They've had a particular uphill battle when it comes to talking to utilities and cities around it, and even OEMs, manufacturers like Nissan or things like that. What do you think at the beginning that enabled you to get good traction with like utilities and cities? What was something that enabled you to get good traction with them and engage them in projects?
Yeah, a good question. I think what enabled us to do this is because utilities and cities very quickly recognized that what we were offering them helped them achieve the carbon goals that they had themselves set up. So there were carbon goals and carbon reduction targets that the cities and utilities have. And they have in the past really struggled with the single family residential upgrade programs. And so they're painfully aware of how difficult this particular sector is to make any kind of progress in. And like the graphs I showed at the beginning, this is where the action really should be. Single family homes is a very big part of that existing buildings picture. And that's where we really need to make impact. And so I think a lot of the traction that we've really received from utilities has been because we were able to show them that with this tool, we're kind of filling a gap that currently exists in their programs. So perhaps we were lucky enough to find that gap and fill that. I think the other thing is that it ties very nicely with the carbon emission reduction goals that cities have in their climate action plans and utilities have in their sort of corporate outlooks and so on. So achieving that with the tool becomes part of their goal.
I think that's great. One of the questions we have about products and partners, how do you choose what products that you suggest to them in the app? Is it just dragged across the internet? Is it from like the SMUD utility store? What fills in those products?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the utilities have these utility stores which allow you to get down to the product that you want to buy, like the Nest thermostat versus an Ecobee thermostat, or a Rheem water heater versus a A.O. Smith water heater, whatever that may be. So those marketplaces are a great place to go to at the end of our experience. What we help you as a homeowner is to decide what you want to do and which out of the categories of water heaters, for example, you should be using. And then once you get to that point, we can either connect you to a contractor through our tool. And we've worked with utilities and programs like Switches On to be able to connect with their database of contractors. We've also worked with another company called BuildZoom in the past, where they have a way to find a contractor for you for the particular job you're doing. So those are ways that we make it easier for the homeowner to find the next step which is either to find the contractor who can, and then they can go there informed from the XeroHome app that here's what I'm looking for, this is what I want, give me that. Or they can also direct themselves to sort of a more do-it-yourself option, which is like a utility marketplace, where you can look at the products yourself and make more decisions about what you want to purchase. But before you can do that, you need to know what you want to buy and why, because there's so many options that you can do to reduce energy use in your home. Which one works for you? And we kind of fit in that location. Like we figure out what you should be doing. Once you realize that this is what I want to do, your next step, we help you get to that next step.
Okay, we're getting towards the end of it here, and I want to ask like one kind of final question. It's from Peter about the discrepancy between incentives for homeowners versus landlords who don't pay the energy cost. How are you seeing that getting handled or addressed by your solution, or how you're working with cities?
Yeah, the split incentive problem, Peter. That's definitely a problem. And how we address that is we work with whoever we can to answer the questions and to educate them about what should be done. So from a homeowner's perspective, if you in single family residential buildings, I would venture a guess that in high-rise or mid-rise multifamily buildings, you have more of a problem where the building is owned by an entity or a landlord, and there are multiple tenants that are not paying the utility bill. In the single-family world, it tends to be a little bit less of that. There is either a direct relationship between a landlord and a tenant. Most of the time, the tenant is paying the utility bill, so there is definitely a clear incentive for them to do that. Our approach to this is that the tool encourages both the landlord and the tenant, whoever is the occupant of that home or the owner of that home, to type in the home address and we can show the journey to them. So the homeowner the tenant can do it and the landlord can do it for the same home. We encourage that. We actually support having two or multiple users for the same home. And the two don't get to see what the other one is doing. So if I answer questions and the tenant answers questions or landlord answers questions, they're kept separate under two accounts. So this tool becomes sort of that starting point of the conversation between the tenant and the landlord. But what you describe as the split incentive problem is one that definitely exists, and there's no real silver bullet here for that. I think that we can start to provide solutions that hopefully homeowners, both landlords and tenants, can start to look at and find the solutions themselves.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us today, Mudit. Everyone, just another big round of applause. Thank you very much for that. It was really informative, and it's great to see the work that you're doing. Thank you all for attending, everyone in person and everyone out there. Reminder, we have our in-person events on 5/12 and 6/12 or 6/2, and our virtual perspectives with Weiss and Miller, past head chair of the CEC, on 5/17. Connect with us through LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. We're everywhere now. Not really active on Instagram though, but it's a cool logo. I want to thank our sponsors and supporters for their support, and our overall program sponsors of Hacker Lab, Reverend Moss Adams, GT Law, and Weintraub Tobin. And thank you all for attending. And that's all we have.